This is your 10-minute warning. Big Ten TED Live starts in 10 minutes. Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live.
And here we are, Big Ten Ted Live is back. And we got a lot to talk about tonight because it is time to talk spring football. There's a lot of anticipation in the air. There's a lot of excitement in the air. But with that and with everything that comes along with spring comes a lot of questions. Comes a lot of who's going to start at quarterback for Ohio State. Comes a lot of can the Iowa defense still remain elite despite losing about half of their guys and half of their key performers in a starting defensive unit? Can Wisconsin bring it all together and be a complete team? Can they fill in their weaknesses? That's what spring football really brings with, because there's a lot of new guys, especially now with the transfer portal. Especially now with all of those things combined. Right before, a lot of times you'd see a lot of new recruits come in. You kind of see them develop for a year, maybe 2 years, and you kind of knew what you were getting. Now with the transfer portal, there's a lot of guys coming from a lot of different directions. And that can be kind of confusing for the fan, right? It can be kind of, what do we expect, especially with spring football, and especially with coaches too. Right? They're implementing these things. They're implementing, well, I got a guy here that's played 3 years of college football, and then I got a guy here that's played 0 years of college football, 4-star guy, whatever. So there's a lot of weighing what's going to be best for your football team as this comes along. So thanks for being here with me tonight on Big Ten Ted Live. Okay, first thing I'm going to start with here today is I'm going to start with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa has done great, well, maybe not great, good things this offseason in terms of repairing their offense and in terms of improving their offense. When you look at what the Hawkeyes have done, right, they go out and get a quarterback that's won a Big Ten title. Say what you want about Cade McNamara. Cade's a guy that can get it done with a great defense, which Iowa has and which I will get to here in just a moment. So Cade McNamara can do it. We know that. We've seen it. Okay, and then they go out, they get Seth Anderson in the transfer portal. He should be able to come in, plug and play, get him in to bolster what they have in that wide receiver room. I believe they still need to go out in the spring transfer portal period and get an additional wide receiver to really bolster up this team. Okay, and then you look at Deontay Vines, you look at Nigo Ragaini coming back, you look at Mr. Baseball, Brody Brecht. Like, there are guys in this Iowa team, like, things are coming together offensively. You look at Eric Hall to bolster that tight end room at the University of Iowa. Things are looking good for the Hawkeyes on the offensive side of the ball. Young offensive line, but you got to think it's going to develop. So that side of the ball, which needed a lot of help, seems to have gotten it. Long way to go, but it seems that they have gotten there, and it seems they've gotten that. The big question I have is, can the Hawkeye defense remain one of the very best defensive units, not only in the Big Ten Conference, but throughout all of college football? Phil Parker is a genius. I said it a couple of years ago after that Iowa-Maryland game in 2021. This defense is the unicorn of college football. The way they create plays and the way they create points for their offense, for their football team, is just amazing. It was nothing like I ever seen before, hence the unicorn reference. But coming into this year, there's a lot of uncertainty. I still think this Iowa's going to be a great defense. I'll get into that and I'll explain why. But there's a lot of uncertainty. Because when you lose probably your best defensive lineman and Lucas Van Ness, a lot of draft people pretty excited about what he brings to the table. You lose a generational linebacker pair. Notice how I said pair. Maybe there's been, individually, maybe it's a little bit different. But in terms of a pair, Seth Benson and Jack Campbell is as good as it gets. right, in terms of putting guys together. And then you look at the secondary, Riley Moss and the plays he was able to make the last couple of years. You look at Kayvon Merriweather. You look at Terry Roberts. You even look at a guy who transferred out to Oregon in Justin Jacobs at linebacker. This is a defense that lost a lot. This is a defense that has been really good. This is a defense that has been the best defense in the Big Ten the last 2 seasons. Okay, I firmly believe you can maybe argue about one season, right? You can argue about last year in Illinois, but I think when you factor in the last 2 seasons, Iowa has been the best defense in the Big Ten. So the big question I have in the spring period, in spring practice here, is who's going to step up? Right? We see that a lot across a lot of Big Ten teams. Who is going to step up and do a great job? Who's going to step up and be the next guys at some of these positions? When I look at the Hawkeyes, this is still going to be the ball Hawkeyes on the back end of this defense. The secondary is still going to be really, really, really good. Okay, you look at Quinn Schulte. He's still back there. He's been a starter. He's logged a lot of snaps. He's been good for Iowa. You look at Cooper DeJean, the turnover machine, right? When a lot of people game planned maybe for Riley Moss last year, Cooper DeJean really stepped up and really became that guy that really made a lot of plays, especially late in the season. And you really saw how Iowa felt his loss in that Nebraska game when he went out with an injury early in that contest. And then you got to add in the high 4-star recruit, best player in the state of Iowa a few years ago, top 50 player in the country, Xavier Nwampa. He's the guy. He stepped in, I believe it was for Kayvon Merriweather when he opted out. Not many opt-outs on this Iowa team in the bowl game. He came in and he had a great game. There's been a lot of anticipation for Xavier to come in and do some things. You factor in those 3 guys, Phil Parker's going to find some depth. He always does. This is going to be a great secondary. It's going to be very difficult to throw the football on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Another reason why I think it's going to be tough to throw the football is their defensive line. When you look at units, I think that's the next unit that really steps up for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Logan Lee and Noah Shannon. Last season, they combined for 97 tackles, 5 sacks combined. I think they're going to anchor a really solid defensive line for Iowa. Okay, I really think these 2 guys are going to step up and be big-time players up front for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Look, they got some players to replace, no question, at linebacker. I think there's some guys that were maybe got some action last year that are going to step up. So the question that preceded all of this is, do I think Iowa's still going to have elite defense? I don't know about elite. I think that's what we got to figure out. How are things going to gel throughout the spring? How are these linebackers going to develop? I want to know all about the developmental phase because this Iowa Hawkeyes program is a developmental program. They develop players really, really well as time goes on at the University of Iowa. And I believe they are going to do that. We've seen them improve on offense. We know the defense is going to be there, especially back there in that secondary. But what they've done the last 2 seasons has been remarkable. Can they continue at that level? Do they need to? I don't know if they need to be elite, but they still, I think, need to be a great defense because I just don't know how many steps forward this offense is going to take at the University of Iowa. A lot of things to keep in mind for the Iowa Hawkeyes going forward. That offense. I see some things from that offense. I really do. I see some potential on the offensive side of the ball for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and get one more wide receiver. I think you get one more wide out, and you're golden. That's how I see this thing for the Iowa Hawkeyes. It's very fun to look at things for Iowa. It all comes down also to what's happening on the coordinator side of things. We know you still got Brian over there. Bad luck, Brian Ferentz. I know that can kind of cause some issues and cause some skepticism from some people, but I still think they're going to be in a pretty solid spot at the University of Iowa. So we're going to move on. We're going to get a couple of more things here today. We're going to talk about Ohio State's quarterback battle. We're going to talk about the surprise team. Who do I think is going to be the surprise team in the Big Ten? as we enter spring practice. Because you've seen Minnesota, that great team in 2019. You saw Northwestern step up in the COVID year in 2020, win a Big Ten West championship. You saw Michigan State get double-digit wins in 2021. You saw Illinois step up in 2022. Who's that team going to be this season? Who's that team? We're running out of teams maybe. You know, are you going to start to go for an Indiana? Are you going to start to go for a Northwestern again? Boy, what a turnaround that would be. Things not looking good at Evanston for old Patty Fitz. Just a reminder as well, you can join the show. We'll hopefully get to the call-ins just a little bit later on, but a super chat as well to get interactive. All right, let's move on to our next segment. And that next segment is all about the quarterback position, and it's all about the quarterback position at maybe a school where the quarterback needs to be good. Ohio State is in an interesting situation right now because you've got the best wide receiver room in the country. Fight me, dare me, fight me. I will fight you on that point. I don't think there's much of a discussion really in terms of a wide receiver room in all of college football. I look at the running backs. I look at Mayan Williams. I look at Travion Henderson. Okay, I look at both of those guys, and I see the talent that they possess. I know they got some things to replace on the offensive line, but this offense has all the tools to succeed. I could be plugged in there. Your boy Big Ten Ted could be plugged in at Ohio State, can throw for 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. Maybe more. Maybe more if you give me a head start. But my point is, Ohio State is going to be fine whether they pick Kyle McCord or whether they pick Devin Brown. I don't really think it matters that much, to be honest with you, but I'm going to break it down anyway. Okay, when you look at Ohio State, these are two guys that are a little bit of a contrast of each other. Now, I'm not going to say, oh, this guy is purely a passer and this guy's purely a runner. Of course, they bleed over into each other a little bit, but for the most part, you know, one guy is more of likes to stay in the pocket. One guy likes to maybe run around a little bit more. I believe Kyle McCord has the edge in this one. He's the leader in the clubhouse, going down the back nine, so to speak. This is a guy, 5-star guy. He was right there with J.J. McCarthy in that recruiting class, right? Mac and Mac, going to both Michigan and Ohio State. I want to give a shout out here to the Letterman Row YouTube channel. They provide great information on Ohio State. And this is kind of where I got some info on Kyle McCord. They say Kyle McCord throws with great anticipation, which is something you need when you play with great wide receivers. You can't go throw it to them. You got to throw it in front of them. Got his nose in the playbook all the time. Got in the film room constantly. He's a very cerebral quarterback as well. If you haven't subscribed to Letterman Row, great resource for Ohio State football over there. And another thing, Kyle McCord played with Marvin Harrison Jr. in high school at St. Joe Prep in the Philadelphia area. Marvin Harrison Jr. has said, you know, this guy, Kyle McCord, is going to get his shot, and when he does, he's going to impress. So the leader right now is Kyle McCord, and we'll see the spring ball. We'll watch the spring game eventually, and you'll be able to see both of these guys throw the football in this scheme and in this offense, but it appears that Kyle McCord is the guy, and I think I want a guy more like Kyle McCord instead of Devin Brown. You look at Devin Brown, he's more mobile. You need to be on the move a little bit more to really get going. And no matter who the quarterback is, I will say this, you need to replace some really good players on the offensive line, including Paris Johnson at tackle, because you can't do nothing. You can't take advantage of the best wide receiver group in all of college football, okay, if you don't got guys to protect you. You can't take advantage of the running game if there's no one there to run block for you. So you kind of see where I'm going with this? Okay, you need more guys around you. I think that's been the story of Ohio State football for the last few years. Quarterbacks have been great. Wide receivers have been great. Skill positions have been great, but it's that toughness and that physicality I think that is going to come into play. I want to see Ohio State, I know this doesn't need to happen, but I want to see Ohio State see a guy really take a big step forward at the end of spring ball. Once they're playing in front of the fans in Columbus, I want to see McCord or Brown really take a big step forward. And doesn't need to happen. Like, this can obviously bleed into fall camp. And to be honest, it probably will bleed into fall camp. But to be honest, I want to see a guy really take steps forward. I want to see a guy, probably Kyle McCord, instill that confidence. And I think, listening to some of these quotes out of Columbus right now, I think there are players that have the confidence, including Marvin, of course, he's got the connection going back to their high school days. I want to see, in the chemistry, I want to see guys really go to bat for one of these guys. I think it's going to be Kyle McCord that's going to lead the Ohio State Buckeyes in 2023. And whoever the quarterback is, Ryan Day has said this, we don't want this guy to have to do everything. Okay, we don't want to put so much pressure on a quarterback, especially a young quarterback, right? They got to go on the road to South Bend to play Notre Dame early in the season. We don't want to put so much pressure on a quarterback that he can't, that eventually, especially early in the season, that it doesn't go very well. We want to be a balanced team. We don't want that quarterback to have to do every single thing, right? You're coming off Justin Fields. You're coming off C.J. Stroud. The expectations, I know Ohio State fans want their quarterbacks to be at the level. Having those guys back-to-back, having top draft picks like those guys back-to-back, it's very enticing. But you need the team around them, especially early in the season in September, to really be good. But I believe it's going to be Kyle McCord that's going to separate himself, maybe after spring camp, but going into fall camp. I think it's going to be Kyle when Ohio State trots on the field for their opener. When I look at Ohio State, I mean, they got all the tools. I still don't think this team maybe is great defensively. I think that's another thing I want to see when we talk about the spring for Ohio State. I want to see where their defense is. I want to see how much they improved. I want to see Ohio State win a physical game this year. I don't know where it's going to be. Is it going to be Michigan? At Michigan once again, right? Couldn't take advantage at Ohio Stadium. Is it going to be there? Where is it going to be? That's what I want to know about this Ohio State football team right now. Can they be physical on offense? Can they be physical on defense? I think that's what we want to find out right here, right now. It's going to be very interesting to watch that quarterback battle as this time progresses here, talking about Ohio State. Moving on throughout the show, thanks everybody for tuning in here tonight. Now, I'm going to preface this next point. I'm going to preface this next thing that I'm talking about with, I'm not sure if there's a right answer. I'm not sure if there's a clear cut. When we talk about a breakthrough team, when we talk about a surprise team, I honestly don't know. Look at the flag behind me. Look at there. Let me get my shoulder out of the way. Look at that flag behind me with all the logos of all the schools in the Big Ten Conference. You see Michigan State breaking through? What about teams in the West Division? You see them breaking through? Let's get into it. The past few years, there have been breakout teams, dare I say, surprise teams in the Big Ten. You go back to 2019, you look at PJ Fleck's Minnesota Golden Gophers that really broke through into that double-digit win column. Of course, that big win over Penn State that really put that program and PJ Fleck on the map at Minnesota. You look at 2020. Hey, it was an even year, right, where Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern, they went toe-to-toe with Ohio State in that Big Ten championship game in the COVID-shortened season in 2020. You look at 2021. You look at Sparty. You look at Michigan State, right? This was a team that won 3 games in the COVID-shortened year in 2020. You got a second-year head coach. He's building up a program that kind of fell off in the latter years of Mark D'Antonio, right? No, they got Kenny Walker, and they put people on notice, getting into the top 5 in the country that season. That was a surprise. That was a breakthrough for Michigan State back there in 2021. And then you look at Illinois. Although Illinois did not finish as strong as maybe some of the other teams that I just mentioned, Illinois really broke through and really proved that this is a team that can win a Big Ten West championship. This is a team that can be in contention. When I look at the flag, and I was doing this, I was just turned around in this chair, and I was just staring at this flag, and I'm like, Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Speak to me, flag. Speak to me. That's what I was staring at this thing this far away. Speak to me. Tell me who's it going to be, because I'm looking at these logos in the East Division. I'm looking at these logos in the West Division. I'm thinking, I can't find it. I can't find it. Like, you look at some of these teams, it's hard for me to imagine a surprise team in the East Division with how good Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State are going to be. It's hard for me. Maryland, I don't know. Maryland's replacing a lot on offense, and Maryland's never really has been great on defense. Indiana with Taven Jackson, I just, I know they've recruited well recently, but they just don't have enough talent. I think it'd be a big victory for Indiana, maybe a surprise for them to get to bowl eligibility this season. Then you got to look at the Big Ten West. I think that's where you got to take a look at who's going to be that team that's maybe going to break through and win a lot of games this season. I went through all of these. I think the clear and obvious pick would be Wisconsin, considering what they've done with coaching, considering what they've done with personnel. But I don't think that's a surprise. Because when you get Tanner Mordecai, when you got Braylon Allen in your backfield, when you got the receiving core that they do, and when you got a well-renowned coach and coaching staff, like guys like Luke Fickell and Phil Longo, I don't think it's much of a surprise. I think that's a cop-out to take somebody like Wisconsin. So I looked all around. I came this close. I came very close to picking Minnesota. Okay, I believe that they are a team that maybe not a lot of people are talking about right now. We saw Ethan Kaliakmanis get better each and every single week, each and every single game, and he eventually put it together in that last game of the season against the Wisconsin Badgers, the last regular season game against Wisconsin. You bring in some really good transfers, Corey Crooms, Elijah Spencer, you got Chris Ottman-Bell back in this lineup. You're good at the tight end position with Brevin Spanford. You get a great MAC running back out of Western Michigan and Sean Tyler. There's going to be weapons on this offense, and we know what Joe Rossi does on defense. But the schedule was just too hard for me. The schedule was too much for me to look away from when it came to Minnesota. So who do I think is going to be that breakout team? Entering spring practice, here's who I have my eye on. Illinois again. And here's why. Okay, a big reason why is because they will have the best tandem up the middle on the defensive line in the Big Ten, maybe even the country. What Johnny Newton and Keith Randall provide up the middle for the Illini is real good, right? Then there's other players. There's Tariq Barnes. There's Gabe Lakis on that team. They need to replace some guys big time in that secondary, but that's one thing that they got to work on. Aaron Henry, the new defensive coordinator, Brett Bielema, of course, that's what they have to work on. Why do I think they're a surprise team? Okay, why do I think they're a surprise team? Their schedule treats them well. Okay, when you look at tough games for Illinois, they play Penn State at home early in the season. At home. Did I say at home? If not, there it is. They play at home against Penn State. Right? Juillar, maybe only a couple of games on his belt. Maybe they can steal one. Maybe. Against a really good Penn State team. Unlikely. But maybe they can steal one early. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Ohio State. When you look at some of their tougher road games, they got to play at Minnesota. They got to play at Maryland. They got to play at Iowa. I think the schedule is favorable. Like you're home against Nebraska. You're home against a good Wisconsin team. The schedule shapes out fairly favorable, I believe, for the Illinois Fighting Illini. I believe they're improved at quarterback with Luke Altmaier. Okay, I don't know if it's by much, but I think he is a guy to keep an eye on as maybe one of the surprises, because I believe this Illinois offense is going to have to shift a little bit, right? They were so dependent on Chase Brown in that running game, and they are going to have some good running backs this season. You look at McCray, you look at Reggie Love, it's a solid tandem back there for Illinois. But this wide receiving core, I think, is better than a lot of people give it credit for. I look at Isaiah Williams. I look at Casey Washington. I look at all of these guys. I look at Pat Bryant. There are playmakers in this receiving core for Illinois. And bringing in a transfer quarterback like Luke Altmaier, I think will increase the talent level maybe. And maybe I think last year they were maybe a little bit too dependent on the running game. But who's the surprise team? I think they're a surprise because I think a lot of people are maybe expecting, well, no Chase Brown, no great defensive backs back there anymore. They're going to fall off. Nebraska's better. Wisconsin's better. Minnesota's Minnesota. Iowa's Iowa. I think a lot of people are expecting Illinois to take that step back. And I just don't know if it's going to happen. Because I still think this is a really good football team. And like I said, the schedule, it's favorable. That's a good thing. And I mentioned that's why I didn't pick Minnesota. Right? And I don't think Wisconsin can be considered a surprise or a breakthrough. Because of just what they have and the personnel that they have, that wouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I believe it's Illinois. That defense is going to be better maybe in the front seven than it was a year ago as compared to the secondary, and this offense, especially in the passing game, is going to improve as well. There's a lot of candidates. A lot of candidates to pick from in terms of who are some guys that could really rise above? Who are some guys that could make that next step? There's really good players there. Really good teams. It's hard to pick. Like I said, I looked at that thing. Iowa. I don't think Iowa's I don't think that's a surprise. You can't pick Iowa. I don't think you can pick Wisconsin as surprises. Okay? Because even though Wisconsin took a step back last year, they still went 6-6. This is still a Wisconsin team that even at their worst goes to a bowl game and wins a bowl game. At their very worst. I know maybe would it be surprising if they went 11-1? Yeah, maybe it'd be surprising there. But I don't think it's going to happen. But yeah, it'd be surprising. It'd be surprising. But we'll see. We'll see with the Wisconsin Badgers. Thanks for everybody for watching Big Ten Ted Live tonight. Remember, comment, and I can get to some of your comments here as we continue throughout the show. Join the chat. I'd like to highlight some of those comments here as we continue to go throughout the show. Let's talk about things that are new. And there was a lot of news out of this program this week because they really got going with spring practice, and there were some headlines with Matt Rule's Nebraska Cornhuskers. New look Nebraska. There are a lot of new faces in Lincoln, Nebraska. There's a lot of new things. Coaches, personnel, attitude, style of play, demeanor, everything had to change after Scott Frost left it in ruin. Just like the Scott Frost era, though, there's a lot of new players coming in. And the question has to be, can they all gel together? Because we've seen it at Nebraska when they don't gel together. What happens? Doesn't look good, does it? No, it doesn't look good. Who's going to step up? Because somebody has to. Some things are going to have to change. I think the first thing I look at is in the backfield. Okay, Anthony Grant suspended due to academics, some off-the-field stuff. Matt Rule and company says it's day-to-day. He's still around the program. Anthony Grant was at the pro day. So this is not a guy that's being exonerated from the program, so to speak. He's still in the mix. But if things go south with Anthony Grant, I still think Nebraska has it covered in the backfield. Because I look at A.J. Allen, and A.J. Allen was really good before he got injured last season. Really young running back that can do some really good things. And then I look at Gabe Ervin Jr. He's kind of battled some injuries throughout his time at Nebraska, but this was a guy that a lot of people were excited about when he came into Lincoln. Okay, and then if you get Anthony Grant back, look, no matter what happens, I think this is going to be a running game, and we know based on what we've heard from Matt Rule and Satterfield, like this is what we've heard from Marcus Satterfield, this is a team This is an offense that's going to look to be more physical. This is a team that's going to look to run the football a little bit more. I look at all three guys in whatever combination exists there. I think things are going to go well for the University of Nebraska. But when you look at the Huskers, I think the quarterback position is a big-time battle right now. And I want to focus on that for just a little bit. Okay, because when I look at the quarterback, Matt Rule was raving about the quarterback. Said, this is the best quarterback room that I've ever been a part of. Casey Thompson was not there at spring ball because he's still nursing some injury stuff. So that tells me he really likes what he saw from Jeff Sims. And I believe it's going to be Jeff Sims at quarterback. I'm not sure if Casey Thompson has fulfilled his requirements to be a grad transfer because he's already used the transfer portal. He would have to use the grad transfer provision to be able to transfer immediately. Has he done that? I don't know. I think that's what's going to happen. And Casey Thompson will go elsewhere during the spring transfer period. You'll have guys like Logan Smothers, Heinrich Harburg as well in that quarterback room for Nebraska. I think Jeff Sims, I watched a guy very much like him. I watched Philip Walker at Temple, right, when Matt Rule was the coach back there in the mid-2010s, and I think they have comparable skill sets. I believe Jeff's, and that's something that is going to have to be figured out here during spring practice. Okay, is it going to be Jeff Sims or is it going to be Casey Thompson? There are some offensive philosophies that need to be shifted around. Who's going to be better at those offensive philosophies? Whose skill set meshes better with those philosophies? I think that's something that Nebraska needs to figure out. And then they need to figure out defense. Tony White is notorious for an aggressive defense in his days at Syracuse. This was a defense that was middle of the road. Eric Shenander, it seemed like, had him doing pretty well back in that 3-9 campaign in 2021. But then you go into 2022, and that defense was atrocious. Couldn't tackle anybody, couldn't wrap up, couldn't defend in pass coverage. They couldn't do anything. They were one of the worst defenses in the Big Ten last season. They got better later in the season when Bill Busch took over, but it was just too much to correct at that point in time. There's a lot to correct at Nebraska. I know there's a lot to be excited about. I know there's a lot of people drinking the Rool-Aid right now, but right now as we're in spring practice, there's a lot to figure out. Sometimes bringing in a whole bunch of new bodies doesn't automatically work. That's what happened last year with Scott Frost and Nebraska. Some of them worked. Trey Palmer ended up being pretty good, but there was a lot of guys in there and things didn't really mesh well. That's the thing about the transfer portal. It doesn't work every single time. So Nebraska's really got to focus in on those issues right there. I believe Nebraska's going to be a good team. I think when you look at Nebraska, I think you got to look towards a 6-6 mark. I think that's got to be your goal. That's got to be your basement. I think that's got to be where you got to get to, and then you go from there. And I think it's not going to be easy getting there. They're going to have to develop a lot of these guys very quickly, I think, to ensure that they will be playing in the postseason, that they will be 6-6. Yep, I look at the Huskers, and I just I see a team that's new. I see a team that's still growing. I see a team that continues to evolve. So that's Nebraska. Moving on. I want to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. I mentioned them briefly earlier on in the show. Mentioned Wisconsin very, very briefly. But I'm going to talk about them in more detail because the more I look at Wisconsin, and if you watch this channel, especially in the offseason, you know how I feel about them Wisconsin Badgers. When I look at Wisconsin, I see good things. I see a team in year number 1 that can make a big-time turnaround. And it's not a surprise, right? Talked about that earlier in the show. It would not be a surprise. So let's talk about the Wisconsin Badgers because they've done a lot. They've done a lot to improve their team this offseason. Wisconsin is looking pretty darn good. Wisconsin has done a lot this offseason to completely transform their program. This is a program that is completely different, and that's a good thing. Okay, but they've improved at the quarterback position. You've probably got the best quarterback since Russell Wilson, maybe the second best quarterback in the history of Wisconsin football, maybe third if you count Darrell Bevell back in 1994, 1993, those types of teams, that first Rose Bowl team with Wisconsin. Okay, but no matter how you slice it, Tanner Mordecai is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in Badger history, or at least it looks that way. You're bringing a new coordinator in Phil Longo that's known for explosive offenses. You keep Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi in Madison. You bring in Bryson Green. You bring in a lot of other good wide receivers. And this is an offense that looks really, really good. And this is a team that a lot of people should be really, 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 really excited about. But there are some weaknesses. There are some areas as we approach spring practice where Wisconsin needs to shore up if they want to be a complete team. And you need to be a complete team in order to compete for a possible Big Ten championship, even a Big Ten West title. Okay, ask Ohio State is when you can sling it all over the yard and maybe you're not physical, especially on defense. Okay, it doesn't work out against some of the Big Ten's best teams, the big boys, like a Michigan. So when I look at Wisconsin and when I look at their weakness, I'm going to start first with the offensive line. What? This is Wisconsin we're talking about. How can they have a weak offensive line? Is that even possible? How is that possible? How is that possible? This is a very young offensive line. A lot of sophomores, a lot of juniors, and we got a new scheme coming in. Like, even if they were staying with the Paul Chryst scheme and running the ball and doing all that stuff, like, they would still be a young offensive line, and there would still be questions there. Now you add in some new principles, new scheme, all that stuff with Phil Longo, and now all of a sudden it gets a little bit more complicated. I think there's a different type of offensive lineman that's coming into Wisconsin. Maybe not the big farm kid that just bulls you over straight ahead. I think you need to be more athletic. You need to be more agile on your feet. There's going to be a little bit more pass blocking. You need to be a little bit more versatile in your run blocking. I think there's a different type of offensive lineman that Wisconsin is going to have. They're going to look for a different type of offensive lineman here in spring practice. And as this deal continues, as this deal progresses, I think we're going to find out exactly who those guys are, right? Offensive line and defense. Those are the areas that maybe, I know I say weakness, but I compare that to the strengths that they have at the skill positions on offense. Okay, when I look at their defense, this is a team that it could be a weakness. I'm not sitting here and saying it will be, but as we approach spring football and maybe you compare it to other parts of the team, especially the offense, this could be the weakness if things don't get together. But I believe things could be going the right direction for the University of Wisconsin. Look, no Nick Herbig, no Keanu Benton. Those were some studs. Okay, when you look at the Badger defense, that was a big part of it right there. Those are going to be NFL guys. No Jim Leonard. A guy that's anchored your defense, a guy that's really built up the Wisconsin defense from a good defense to a great defense. And a couple of years ago, an elite defense in the Big Ten Conference. All those guys are gone. There's a lot of rebuilding that Mike Tressel has to do. And there's, once again, like we talked about the offense, new scheme, 3-3-5 in place. So there's some different personnel in different places that you're going to have to look for. The first guy I look at in terms of turning this weakness into a possible strength is Jeff Petrowski, the Michigan State transfer on that defensive line. This is a guy that injury-riddled season last year, 5.5 sacks, though, in 2021, over 30 tackles in 2021. This is a team in Wisconsin, and this is a guy in Jeff Petrowski that I believe is going to be one of the anchors on the defensive line. If Jeff stays healthy, this is a guy that could wreak some havoc. This is a guy that could bring some balance to this football team. This is a guy that could make some big-time plays on defense for Wisconsin. Okay, and then their linebackers. I think their linebackers are actually pretty good. When I look at their units as a whole, I think their linebackers maybe have the most depth. I look at Mema Jongmeta. I look at Jordan Turner. I look at C.J. Getz. Those were the top 3 tacklers for Wisconsin last season. It wasn't Keanu Benton. It wasn't Nick Herbig. Those were mostly edge guys. Those were guys that got after the quarterback. Those were guys that put pressure on in the passing game for opposing offenses. Okay, when you look at Wisconsin, I think they're more stout in the linebacking core this season. Jongmeta, I think, is going to step up in a big way. Jordan Turner has been in this defense now for a few years, and he knows what to expect, and he knows what it takes to get to that level. They need to step up. They just can't be like they were. They need to step up. They need to show the world. They need to show Luke Fickell. They need to show this coaching staff in spring ball that these are guys that can get the job done. And in a 3-3-5 system, they need to have the ability to adjust on the fly. In a 3-3-5 system, these are guys that need to be agile, covering and pressuring going forward. You need to be able to go forward and backwards a little bit in a 3-3-5 system. Their defensive backfield is going to be interesting. They bring back Alexander Smith at corner, but I think if we're looking at a possible weakness of this defense, it could be back in pass coverage. No John Torchio back there anymore, but Alexander Smith, I think, is a really good corner for them. You just have to make sure that this is not going to become a weakness. You have to make sure during spring camp right now that you focus on the defensive side of the ball. And I have a lot of confidence in this Wisconsin coaching staff because I look at Luke Fickell, I look at Mike Tressel, I look at all of these guys, and they look pretty good. They have the experience of building up a great defense, especially in the secondary. Mr. Sauce Gardner, who's a great up-and-coming corner for the New York Jets, he was in this system at Cincinnati, so I think they can develop those types of guys. In spring camp, Wisconsin needs to focus on the offensive line, and they need to focus on the defense to build this Badger team into a complete team that can contend for a Big Ten championship in 2023. And I think this team can contend for a Big Ten title. If the things bounce their way and if they develop the way I think that they can develop, this could turn into a pretty good Wisconsin team. Pretty good Wisconsin team. Pretty good Wisconsin team. I'm going to finish things off with the defending back-to-back defending Big Ten champion Michigan Wolverines. Holy crap, are they going to be good. Holy crap, Michigan. If you were to take the running backs in the Big Ten, regardless of school, and you were able to rank them and just stack them up, there's a chance that Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards might be 1-2. There's a good chance they might be 1-2. Great chance. They might be in that order. Honest question. Can anybody stop Michigan? Anybody going to step up and contain Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards this year? Because holy crap, is that a great backfield at the University of Michigan. Holy crap, is that an amazing duo back there. Because these guys, considering their health, if they stay healthy the entire season, this could be a record-setting tandem for Michigan. Because the big thing I look at, right, back-to-back Joe Moore Award-winning offensive lines, okay, is that offensive line, right? Because when you have offensive lines of that caliber, you're going to lose some guys. They bring in some really good Miles Hinton and a few other Pac-12 transfers. They did really good in the transfer portal going after the offensive line and going after linebacker and some defensive help in there as well. When I look at all of this being considered, this is a Michigan team that can do it again. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards individually are Heisman Trophy contenders. Maybe you put them both together, you put them both in the same phrase, and then maybe things are going to be a little bit different. I think that's where they get going. Because when I look at Corum and I look at Edwards, how do you game plan against this? How do you game plan against the game-breaking ability of Blake Corum? How do you game plan against the tough yardage of Donovan Edwards? It is going to be extremely tough. And the key to Michigan, as good as their running backs are, the key to Michigan is the offensive line. And just like I just said, they go out and they get really good transfers, Power 5 experience that have played at a big level. And they're going to be able to push the pile. They're going to be able to push forward. Who says they can't win 3 consecutive Joe Moore Awards as the best offensive line in the country? Okay, this is a Michigan team that is going to be there yet again. Are they the best backfield in the Big Ten? Did a video on that. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, going to have something to say about it. Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson, going to have something to say about it. Maybe even Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi, going to have something to say about it. Right? There are going to be guys, and other teams that are going to be in the mix. But, man, when you look at Blake Corum, when you look at Donovan Edwards, how are you stopping it? What, you stack up in the box. J.J. McCarthy has proven. Now, he hasn't proven it a lot of times, but he's proven that he can go over the top. I think they got Cornelius Johnson coming back on their team as well this season. So that's what I want to know. How do you contain them? How do you stop them? Our buddy Hummus Hero checking in here tonight. Can they stay healthy is a better question, because I believe at the beginning of the season, Donovan Edwards was a little banged up. Blake Corum obviously carried the load a lot during that period. And then Donovan Edwards came back, and of course Blake Corum had that injury towards the end of that Illinois game. And he really wasn't able to go for the rest of the season other than that. But both of them proved without the other, they're just fine. Donovan Edwards busted off against Ohio State, right? This is a team that is going to be able to get the job done, I don't think, regardless. I'm very curious to see how defenses game plan against the University of Michigan as this deal goes forward, because it is very difficult to game plan because their offensive line is really good. I'm not sure, right off the top of my head, I'm not sure if there's a defensive line that can really match up with what they're doing, what Michigan is doing on the offensive line. That's just the thing. They're just bigger and meaner and tougher than you. That's it. It reminds me of that scene from Yellowstone. Kevin Costner, John Dutton, comes into the office, gets a move on the security guard, throws the wine bottle coming out. The security guard says, "Oh, that was a good move." And he says, "I'm just meaner and tougher than you. I'm just meaner." That's how Michigan is. I'm just a meaner guy. I'm just tougher. I'm going to bowl you over. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know exactly how I'm going to do it. And that's how Michigan plays. They know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they're going to do. And they know exactly how they're going to get the job done. That's it. That's the list. That's going to wrap things up here on Big Ten Ted Live tonight. Thanks for everybody for tuning in here tonight. Until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.